So last year I went to an Honor event and they released two mobile phones. Now the first one was the Honor 7X. Now it is a great phone and I did fall in love with it, but it is the lesser of the two phones that were at the actual event. Now the second phone that they spoke about at the event was this one here, and this is the Honor View 10. Now the View 10 is a mid-range phone. I'll call it a mid-range phone, which costs around £400. You can get it on contract also through various mobile phone tariffs in the country as well. This is based in the UK, by the way. But it's actually really trying desperately to cement itself within sort of that mid-range market. So as I've said before, Honor are an offshoot brand of Huawei, which comes straight out of China. And they're hugely popular over sort of in the Far East and around Asia. But they haven't quite made that transition into the Western world yet. And with something like this, I can't really see why they're struggling, because what I can see in front of us is a pretty decent mobile phone. So I suppose, along with speaking about the different specifications that this phone has to offer, I want to really attempt to try and get this phone over to the Western world and into the hands of users over here as much as possible, because I really do think for the price you're missing out on quite a lot. So Honor have decided to go for the more uncommon 18:9 aspect ratio with this mobile phone, and it also means that they're able to put a 6-inch screen on a smaller sized body. Now that for me is an actual plus, because you're getting a smaller phone literally that will fit in kind of the palm of your hand quite easily. Now the phone isn't quite bezel-less either, like, I don't know, the iPhone X or the iPhone 10 for example, which is pretty much all screen now. But you have got very, very minimal bezels down the left and the right hand sides. Now the only thing letting it down is the fact that they've put the camera at the top, so you've got the fatter bezel at the top here, and they've actually opted to put the fingerprint sensor on the front of the phone, which means that they had to put a bezel in the bottom as well, which doesn't quite give it a full flush look like the iPhone 10, but it still, I think, does pretty well, and it's still a pretty smart looking handset. Now the phone is actually quite comfortable to hold in the hand. It doesn't feel as if it's going to go anywhere very easily. Now the only thing I would point out is the fact that this metal back can feel a little bit slippery depending on the kind of texture you've got on your hands. I mean, it's alright at the moment, but it is very, very smooth. It's a very, very smooth back, and I can see that it being quite difficult to hold if you've got kind of dry hands. It will start slipping around. But as it stands, it actually feels quite nice and fits quite comfortably within the hand, and everything is pretty much easily reachable as well. Like, I'm not really stretching very far to get to the fingerprint sensor. The power on the left hand side, as well as the volume rocker, actually does a really nice job. I can reach that and it's no problem at all. Now the nice thing about this phone as well is that it has a headphone jack on the bottom, so you can opt for that if you're using this as a media device. And it also comes with USB Type-C as well, which on a mid-range handset, I think that's really quite cool. On the Honor 7X that they released at this kind of the same time as this handset, you've still got that old style micro USB, which is okay, but I tend to find with micro USB that it does break relatively easily. With USB Type-C, it's a lot more robust fit in the bottom, so you're not worrying too much about snagging the charging cable and anything, because it's a lot better built than a micro USB. But overall, the phone is relatively well designed, and the only thing the downfall is the slippery back, but it's okay for the most part. So the entire case comes in Honor's sort of signature blue colour, or you can get it in something called Midnight Black as well. I personally prefer the blue so much more than the black. It looks a lot more stylish, I think, and it looks a lot more flashy as well, having something that's relatively different to your average black mobile phone. At the top and the bottom of the phone, I hope you can see on the camera there that it actually has colour-coded aerials. They're a slightly darker blue, maybe even going to as far as to say they're nearly black, but it's a nice little stylish touch, I think, at the top and the bottom, and it just helps sort of finish off that curvature of the actual rear of the phone quite nicely. Now the only other downfall about this whole thing being made from metal is there's no wireless charging technology or capability with this phone at all. You can only charge it via USB Type-C, which is a bit of a shame, seeing as there are places now that offer free wireless charging, like in Starbucks. I've seen companies trying to get tables in there with wireless charging pads, things like local libraries maybe. Or there are benches now, actually, in London. You can get smart benches which offer wireless charging. So just put your phone down for a little while, have a bit of a charge, and then your phone is ready to go again because it's got a little bit more juice inside. I will say one thing about the screen before talking about the screen in more depth is it's an absolute fingerprint magnet. And I'm not sure what kind of texture the screen has. It's made of glass, but whether it's coated in something, watch out because it does pick up fingerprints relatively easily. So I would get some kind of screen protector on there if you wanted to keep that nice and fresh looking, or you're going to constantly, like I do, grabbing your t-shirt or your jumper or whatever and just giving it a quick wipe just to get the fingerprints or as much of the fingerprints off of the actual phone as possible. So the screen you've got here is a full HD 2160 by 1080p display. Now, the reason that it is 2160 by 1080p rather than your standard 1920 by 1080 is the fact that it's an 18 by 9 aspect ratio, so you've got a little bit extra at the top and the bottom to play with. And there is a setting on these phones as well to switch it between standard mode or full screen mode as well, which stretches out the screen a little bit. But it doesn't actually look too bad in that mode, although videos do look a little bit stretched out sometimes. But you do lose a bit of detail as it does zoom into those videos slightly to really scale up to the aspect ratio of the screen. But saying that, it's not a huge issue. Now, Honor have given you the chance to actually change the color temperature of the screen from sort of a warm standard color all the way down to a cool vivid tone, which changes with the color temperature of the actual phone. So when you're on standard, yes, whites do look white, but it's not as bright and colors aren't as sharp and as vivid. But if you do change it over to the vivid, then you have to be wary because whites do start to look a little bit blue. You're not getting as good a picture quality as, say, something like the OnePlus 5T, for example, because that's using AMOLED technology, whereas this is using an older style LCD technology, which is a bit of a missed trick, I think. Whether they've used that to save money on manufacturing costs rather than going for a decent AMOLED screen on there, I don't know. But I do think that that is a bit of a downfall when it does come to colour reproduction. Colours stop looking natural and they look more, not washed out, but because the whites turn into blues and there's such a blue colour temperature tone that's placed over the actual image, it makes the colours look a lot more, I don't know, it dampens it but makes it more vivid at the same time. It's not quite, as I say, a natural colour. It's too vivid at times, especially when consuming media through YouTube or even something like Netflix or Amazon Prime. Now, what is nice is that this screen is incredibly bright, and it means that now that the summer months are coming up in the UK, we're going to have the chance to be able to put our phone screens up to the top brightness. But with this, I've only been using it on around half brightness. It's too bright sometimes at top brightness, and the trade-off putting your screen up to the top brightness against its battery is damning, and I'd rather have my screen at half brightness, which is still unbelievably readable on this phone. It's a lot brighter than most other handsets that we've had a look at, and even on higher end handsets like the iPhone 8 that we've checked out or the Samsung S8. I know the S9's out now, we haven't had a chance to see that yet. The brightness is really, really good in terms of being able to not hit that maximum brightness. You can, if it's a really bright day, like the sun is glaring down on you, turn it up to its full brightness, and then you've got a screen that you're able to read in the sun, which is really, really cool. So with the phone's performance, this is where it absolutely shines over its younger sibling, the Honor 7X. Now inside is a Kirin 970 octa-core processor, and that's paired with 6GB of RAM. Now this setup can absolutely storm through anything really thrown at it. I never had any trouble with the app stuttering or multitasking, was flawless, and it's a really, really, really fast phone to use. Now it uses the EMUI 8.0 operating system, which is Huawei's own operating system or skin, and I'm really, really super impressed with how this phone actually performed. I wasn't expecting a huge increase over the Honor 7X, which we tested a little while ago. There'll be a link in the description to that. But it performed well enough to be able to keep up with all of my everyday apps and even going on to gaming as well. I mean, graphic performance within this phone while keeping up with the processing speed, it was absolutely flawless. I loved it. Now, there are two aspects of this mobile phone which really did impress me while I was at the event and actually in real time as well while I was using the phone. And that is called AI. And that's something that Honor are calling AI. It's the technology that's actually built inside the phone, inside the software. Now, the first capability that I tried out was its facial recognition ID. Now, this is usually on something like an iPhone 10, which costs nearly £1,000, and it's something that really did show up when Apple were launching the iPhone 10. It was something that they really did hammer home, that this is the top thing. But for it to appear on a £400 mobile phone, I think it's absolutely superb. It works incredibly fast. So as you can see, this mobile phone is actually locked. It's on its lock home screen at the moment. But if I start turning it towards my face, then it won't unlock. Then it doesn't unlock straight away. You have to do it a little bit faster, so just to really surprise it. So it's on its lock screen, and there you go, it's unlocked. It depends on the type of lighting you're in. We're not in the most ideal lighting. You have to be in a bright room for this to work really fast first time. But as you can see, it's turned away from my face. It's off, but I look at the face, click the unlock button, and it turns on like that. So the second thing I want to talk about is its text-to-speech recognition, but it does come with a twist. It's not just English text-to-speech. You're not just going to get someone repeating anything back to you in English. You can use this to, in real time, have conversations with other people. How are you today?
Êtes-vous aujourd'hui?
Wo wohnst du?
Where do you live?
Guten Tag.
Good day.
I am 28 years old.
Ich bin 28 Jahre alt.
So battery performance with this phone is actually pretty good, as it has a 3750 milliamp battery inside, which could easily stretch out over a day's use, especially if you're not pounding the games. If you're a very light user, you may be able to get battery life into a second day, but if you've used your phone while commuting to work to check up on your social media or your emails, and then you use it at lunch to watch a couple of videos, and then you use it on your way home, generally speaking, you're looking at around a day's worth of use. That's without playing games, because games are very battery intensive, and they will just sap the juice from your phone. But the good news is that this phone does use USB Type-C charging, so you will get around 50% charge in about 30 minutes. So it has this really super fast charging capabilities, which, yeah, get your phone plugged in when you get to work. If you want to play games when you're going to work, if you get the train, then when you get to work, just plug your phone in. Half an hour later, you've got an extra 50% battery to play with. So that is a really solid advantage of this phone. So Honor have again decided to go for a 2-camera setup, and also a selfie camera on the front of the phone as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if we talk about the rear cameras at the moment, you can see that there are 2 lenses. Now, usually on a phone, and you've probably seen as well, that one camera lens is a wide angle and the other one's a telephoto, but not quite here. Now, one lens on the back of this phone is for color, and the other one, which is a higher megapixel, is for monochrome. Now, that means black and white. Now, the advantage that you have with that is that the monochrome lens and the color lens both work in conjunction with each other. So when you take a photo, it's taking 2 photos. Now it's pulling the detail of the black and white image, the monochrome image, because you get a lot more detail in light areas and dark areas, and then combining that with the color to give you a better photo overall, and a much better performance on the camera itself. So let me just focus in on those. You focus in by tapping on the screen. Now the nice thing is that the actual lenses come with an f1.8 aperture, which means that the phone is trying to get as much light into the lens as possible. Now that can be changed if you go into the phone, into the camera's Pro mode. You can change the aperture to what you want. You can actually change the shutter speed, aperture, the ISO, you name it. There is a lot of options in there. But if you are just putting it on the automatic mode, then you can get quite a nice picture quality from the actual models or whatever your subject is that you're taking a picture of. Now, if you are using a selfie cam as well, you will notice on this, and I noticed it, and it's really quite cool, that the beauty mode doesn't only add a really smooth layer to your face like on most handsets. It gives you, if I turn the beauty level up, I'll take a selfie, it actually gives you a shallow depth of field. So you can have a really nice bit of bokeh. Now, if you can see on that photo, then you can see that the bricks behind me are actually blurred. And I've as a subject I'm really kind of sticking out from the background. It's a really, really nice feature to have on a phone, and I think that for any kind of budding photographers out there or even selfie enthusiasts, you'll be able to get a really nice kind of image from your selfies and also from sort of other photography. Now, that's not saying that this camera is superb, it's the best thing ever. It's not. And I will say now that if you are using any kind of zoom on there, you're going to be losing a lot of detail. And then with something like the OnePlus 5T, for example, which is the closest really priced phone, that storms over this camera. If you're shooting this on the absolute widest setting that you can go, or the widest focal length that you can go, then yes, the detail looks pretty good. But if you are going to be zooming in on that picture, then you'll start to notice the detail around edges, especially sharper edges, aren't going to look as good. Another fault I found with the camera is its lack of detail within low-level lighting. Because the camera wants to get as much light as possible into the lens, when you are in a low light level environment, like if it's evening time or if you're at night in a home, then the ISO will start to get a lot more sensitive, meaning that you start to get some really grainy photos. And especially if you're not holding the phone really, really still, then you'll start to get really grainy photos and on occasion really blurry photos. There have been on occasion where I've been outside in bright light and the phone also hasn't picked up on the scene that I'm taking a photo of, and it has produced a really, really bad photo, so I've had to retake and retake. That's only happened a few times, but it's something to think about if you are looking for a phone for its camera capabilities. So on the camera as well, there are a bunch of features that you will probably end up using, like time-lapse, slow-mo, HDR, Pro Mode, and there are loads of different things like documents or food, or let me read you some. There is really a lot of things to get stuck into. AR, it does night shots, filters, which is basically like an Instagram filter, artist mode, same kind of thing. Watermarks, you can put your own watermark on there, monochrome, panorama, light painting, you name it, it basically does it, and it will set the camera up to that kind of situation that you're in. So yes, there are swings and roundabouts to this camera. It takes brilliant, sort of very, very wide focal length pictures. Won't take very, very good zoomed in pictures, but you get a whole host of functions available on the phone as well. Now, the other thing is the camera. It doesn't record 4K. It only records 1080p. But saying that, I think it'll be a little bit counterproductive if it could record 4K, because you've got no way of watching 4K on this phone because it's only a 1080p screen. Despite the slightly wider aspect ratio, you're not going to get a full 4K image anyway. And I think that most people will probably, if they're taking video with their mobile phone, they're going to be launching it on Facebook or YouTube, Twitter, social media anyway, so which are going to very, very heavily compress the image. It's not really going to make a difference if you're filming at 1080p. It still looks very good. I'm very happy with the video quality that you do get from this phone, but it's just not going to be the highest quality, especially once you get it onto social media anyway. So the Honor View 10 is a remarkable mobile phone, and it's definitely worthy of some kind of mid-range handset crown. Yes, it does cost £400, which is still... that's still a lot of money, I'm not going to lie. £400 just a single one mobile phone is a lot of money. But if you consider that we are now in an age where mobile phones are costing £1,000, like the iPhone 10 or the Samsung S9 is costing near to £1,000, £400 for what you are getting with this mobile phone doesn't seem bad at all, and is actually a very impressive phone. There are a couple of things that do let it down, and that's its subpar screen compared to something like the OnePlus 5T, which gives you an AMOLED display. This uses the LCD technology, and the camera isn't as good as I was expecting it to be. It's still better than most £400 handsets on the market. The OnePlus 5T, yes, it has a better camera, but for what you're actually getting for that £400 is absolutely stunning, and it's a very, very superb phone, and I would definitely recommend, if you are looking for a new smartphone but don't want to stretch to that £1,000 mark, then why not something like this? Honor is connected to Huawei or Huawei, depending on how you say it, I suppose. It's a very good brand, and I just hope that they can get into the Western market quickly, because there are people here that are missing out on a decent phone at a decent price. So thank you very much for checking out my review of the Honor View 10. If you enjoyed this review, then click that like button. Please do subscribe to keep up with all of our tech and gaming videos. And also let us know what you thought of the Honor View 10 and whether you would go for something like this or spend a little bit extra for the OnePlus 5T, or you would opt for a contract handset and get something like an iPhone 10 or a Samsung S9 and you would just swallow the cost for one of them. I do apologise for being on this plain backdrop. If you've seen our vlog, you kept up with the channel, you'll see that we're building another set in here, but the videos still need to come and I still need to get these pumped out for you. But do bear with us. This will hopefully be fixed very, very soon, maybe a week or two, I'm not too sure. But anyway, thank you very much for watching and we will see you in the next video.